I have spent a lot of time in this driving seat. "2,000 kilometres, 4 countries, 8 days, and a whole lot of fun." We are back from our lovely road trip around Europe where we visited France, Belgium and Germany. Here is how the trip went and what we got up to on the trip. So we started off on Friday where we drove down to the south coast to spend our first night before our early shuttle across to Calais. I absolutely love using the Eurotunnel. It's so much faster and so much easier than a ferry, and I will use it every time we go across. And I get signal throughout the whole trip, so we just sat there and watched Netflix for the whole journey. Once we arrived in France, we drove just under an hour to the lovely town of Dunkirk. We stopped here just to break the driving up a little bit as we were going to have quite a big driving day, and it's always nice to visit new places. It also meant that we could have a nice walk along the beach to stretch our legs. And then after a bit of lunch we headed over to Belgium for our first night. And our first stop was a nice forest campsite just on the outskirts of Antwerp. Not the most peaceful spot as it was a national holiday in Belgium, but it was still a very, very nice campsite. We only spent one night here before we made our way over to Germany, and our first stop in Germany being Bonn. In Bonn we were staying there for 2 nights, so we discovered the area a little bit. And the first day we visited the botanical gardens and a little bit of the city centre. And the second day we went to a place called Drachenfels, which translates to Dragon Rock, and this was a beautiful hike up to the top of a mountain with amazing views over the River Rhine and the city Bonn. The walk up to the top was absolutely stunning, not the longest of walks, but very, very steep and so worth the views when you get to the top. And on the way down we stopped at a castle which was part way up called Schloss Drachenberg. A beautiful castle with some stunning gardens, and we spent a few hours touring around this. Now, after 2 nights in Bonn, the next day was something I was very, very excited for. And that is because we were visiting the Nurburgring. Unaware of the Nurburgring, it is one of the most famous and dangerous racetracks in the world. Also known as the Green Hell, the elevations, the undulations and the unpredictable weather really make this an automotive spectacle to visit. Luckily for us though, we had great weather on the day we visited. It was glorious sunshine and very, very nice and warm. So we set off on the Tuesday, cruising down the Autobahn with one destination in mind. And our first spot for watching some wonderful bits of machinery battling around the track was the Sabrina Schmitz corner. Luckily for us, the day which we planned to go to the Nurburgring was the Gran Turismo track day, meaning the track was occupied by some of the most pinnacles of engineering. These are Porsche GT3 RS, Aston Martins, Lamborghinis and of course BMWs. I would recommend going to the Sabrina Schmitz corner for viewing, as it's very close to the main area of the Nurburgring and it's a great spot. You get a lovely tight left-hander into a long straight where you can see the cars really pin it out of the corner and testing the levels for the grip through the corner. But soon enough we became hungry, so we headed over to the town of Adenu. This place is a very popular spot when visiting the Nurburgring due to a great collection of different eating establishments. And the fact that the racetrack goes straight over the top of the town really adds to the vibe. I have to say this was one of my favourite spots to view the racetrack. It really shows how much elevation and altitude change there is within this course. Where we view the track, there was a long left-hander coming down the hill, over a bridge, into a mellow left-right chicane, back up into the steep mountains of the Rhine region, and it was absolutely breathtaking. Being at this spot, you really understand why the track gets the nickname and the reputation it holds. had one more spot to go and watch some cars before the end of the day, and that was at Platz. Now the track here wasn't as impressive as Adenu, but the food trucks and benches, and it was very sunny, so it made it a pretty nice place to chill and watch some cars. We got there quite late, so we didn't actually see loads of cars coming past, but I would recommend going here if you want somewhere to relax. Something to note if you are planning on visiting Nurburgring. During the week, the track is closed to the public in the daytime, so you can only drive it between the hours of 5 PM and 7 PM in the week. If you are going, double check what's on in the daytime in the week, as they quite often have events, but sometimes no events will be going on, so the track could be empty. I don't want you to waste a trip. Now I didn't take the van around the track for two reasons. Number one being we still had over 1,000 kilometers of driving left of the holiday, and I didn't want to cause any breakdowns because I don't think that would have gone down too well. And I think with a track like this, I want to save it for when I've got a car which can do the track justice, and not a stupidly low campervan which rubs whenever I turn hard left. You never know, in a couple of years' time I might be looking up about taking a track-focused Subaru or BMW around the Nurburgring. We can only pray, can't we? Now after our day at the Nurburgring, we had an hour and a half drive back to the city of Cologne, where we're going to be spending 2 more nights, and we'd stay close to the city centre to try and reduce the amount of time we spent driving around in the van. And the perks of the campsite which we stayed at is that we could get in and out of the city without having to move the van at all, so we could properly set it all up nicely with the awning. It also means we don't have to deal with any of the ULEZ zones, making everything nicer and easier. Cologne is a beautiful city, but we didn't get to discover as much as we wanted due to a bomb. So it turns out 2 World War II bombs were discovered a couple of days before we arrived in Cologne, and the day they planned on defusing them was the day we were heading into the city centre. But it wasn't the end of the world. We still got to see the cathedral and then headed to the place called the Sudstadt, or if we translate that into the Queen's, it means the Salt City. And we discovered a beautiful Italian restaurant where we had some lovely pasta, and just round the corner from that was a Lancia Delta Integrale HF with white on white. What a stunning car. On our other day in Cologne, we headed for a nice bike ride along the Rhine towards the city centre again to get a coffee and pastry before we started our long journey back. On our drive back to the UK, we had 2 more stops planned. The first one being a lovely campsite just on the outskirts of Ghent. Now when we planned our trip originally, we'd said we were going to stop at Ghent without doing any research on the town or knowing anything about it, and I have to say the city blew me away. It was such a beautiful town, and I would really recommend it if you want a weekend away or you're planning a Europe trip yourself, because it was so nice. And after a lovely day in Ghent, we headed to our next stop, which was a lovely campsite in between Bruges and the French border. Now this is where the weather turned worse, so we just spent the night chilling in the van, playing games and watching films. And then after that, it was time to hit the tunnel, and that is our Europe trip all done and over. In fairness, the van performed great. It was very comfy to drive, a little bit cosy, but very nice to sleep in, and we had no issues mechanically whatsoever. Now, I will be honest, there were a few issues with my wonderful carpentry and my electrical skills, but we'll cover that in the next video where I tell you everything which has gone wrong with this van. For now, I'll leave you all to plan your Europe trips. I would really recommend one.